So today I'm going to be talking about tinctures. Now, a tincture is where a herb has been soaked in alcohol and that alcohol has extracted the medicinal properties. Now, here's one I made earlier. So this is just a normal glass jar, and in this case I've actually filled it with cloves. So it's filled to the top with cloves, and then you just pour over the top the alcohol. In this case I've used vodka. Vodka is often used in tinctures because it's got a high amount of alcohol, and that acts as a preservative and a really good extracting agent. So we can just leave that for a second to strain out through a sieve. I could use put it through some muslin, but with cloves I'm unlikely to get too much debris that's going to come out into my tincture, but I can restrain it afterwards once this is just dripped through. So the added advantage of a tincture is that it is of a much stronger medicine than in comparison to a tea, for example. So if you compare the two, a cup of tea compared to a tincture, it would be 1 drop of tincture or 2 drops to a cup of tea, whereas so you would have to drink a lot more tea to be able to get the sort of the levels that you can get with a tincture. So I'll just explain, because people can get confused with different tincture strengths. Now, if you're going to a health food shop, you'll see on the bottle the tincture strength, and this will be given in a ratio. Usually in the UK, most of the tinctures that are sold are a 1 in 10, which means that to 1 part of herb, they have used 10 parts of alcohol. So if this was, for example, 100 grams, then it would be 100 grams of herb to a litre of alcohol. Now this makes quite a weak tincture, so it means that you've got a lot of alcohol but you're not using a lot of medicinal plant property. Now most tinctures that you make yourself, like this one for example, I've not measured it, I've just used the glass jar, filled it to the top, and then filled it to the top with alcohol. Now if we were to measure this, you'll probably find it's about the proportion of 1 to 3. So we've got 1 part herb and 3 parts alcohol, and that's the sort of strength that the majority of tinctures you'll make yourself will be. And if you're going to buy a high grade medicinal tincture, they're often of that strength and higher. So you can go higher again. So if you had the same amount of plant material but you used 2 parts alcohol into here to extract it instead, you're going to get as you go up, you're going to get quite a dry mixture because you're not using a lot of alcohol. So what you would need to do is you need to pop that through a press, which we'll be talking about at a later stage. Now, so that would be the 1 in 2, where you've got 2 parts alcohol to your 1 part herb. Now you can go further again, which is a 1 in 1. So to the same amount of herb, you add the same amount in weight of alcohol. Now, if you do that again, it's quite difficult to be able to extract in that way at home because you get a lot of wastage, and it's difficult to be able to get the amount of tincture out of your plant material because you're not using enough liquid to be able to put it. Even if you pop it through a press, it is very difficult to get the amount out that you would need to use as a medicine. But there are ways of doing that in factories, and people who make tinctures, they professionally, then they can make it where you will get a 1 in 1, what's called a 1 in 1 tincture. So if we go back to this clove, now I can use that and get every little drip out of there, but for now I'll just take that out just so you can have a look and see what it looks like. So tinctures, I mean, they vary in colour because it depends on what it is that you're extracting. And you can use fresh plant material or you can use dried plant material. If you're going to use fresh plant material, you need to take into consideration the fact that there is a lot of water in that. So it's actually going to bring your percentage of alcohol down, and you need to be careful that it doesn't go down too low, because if it goes below about 20%, you're going to start to get mould growing in your tincture. So you do need to make sure that the alcohol percentage is above, usually 20 to 25%, which is why we use vodka, because it's about 38%. So the cloves were dried, so I don't need to worry about the water content. So this tincture is 38%, just as the vodka was, because we've got no water content in there, or very little water content in there. So you'll see it's a very sort of syrupy, dark, reddy brown colour. And I mean, a lot of plant material does come out somewhere of a green to right the way down to reddy browns and blacks if you're using barks and roots. Now this tincture, now we know it doesn't have any water in it. I'm just going to pop that back in there. This can now be bottled, so I'm just going to bottle this one. Now I'm using, you'll see in a second, a brown glass bottle. Now this will help to keep the light out, because that can degrade tinctures. So it's in this brown bottle, I'll label it shortly. Now, so yeah, it's in glass. There are some people who say that it's fine to keep tinctures in plastic, and some people who don't. You can research that yourself. In this case, I'm using glass, and that will actually last at least 10 years. As long as nothing is going to be added into here that's going to cause any kind of mould, then it should last for at least 10 years. But they do degrade and lose their medicinal properties as time goes on, so you do need to keep an eye on it. Actually, clove is one of the ones that doesn't degrade very much, so it is really handy to have tinctures, because you can have a very strong medicine in this bottle. You can keep it in your medicine cabinet, and it's not taking up a lot of room. It's not going to go off in the same way that if you had a bag of dried herbs to keep just in case you needed them for first aid. That's going to go off. You're going to need to replenish your stocks, whereas with tinctures you still need to be able to keep an eye on mould. Now, a good thing to check is to see if you've got little dots of green fur, which they'll grow around the outside of the bottle. So that's be careful of that. Smell, again, the smell of mould. I mean, it's difficult to be able to see in this liquid, but sometimes you can actually see that mould is growing on the top, or it's growing throughout the liquid. So if there is any signs of mould, pop it through a sieve and take a look inside to see if anything's growing, because it's really important to make sure that you haven't got anything growing in there. That would be more of a problem if we were using a fresh plant material, because you've got all of that water that's in there with the alcohol, and that's where you're going to get bacterial growth and fungal growth. So that's tinctures, and I'll be talking another time about how to use a tincture press. But at home you don't need anything as fancy as that. Just a jar, some vodka, and a sieve is absolutely fine.